Boozed and Confused is a comedy and weird topic podcast. Adult language may be used, probably by me. While our episode topics may be educational in nature, we are not responsible if your children start dropping the F-bomb to their kindergarten class. Listener discretion is advised. Howdly doodly, neighboring.
Hey, how we feeling? What's the word? How we doing?
How is everybody? We've missed you.
This
I'm
is
sure
why-
you haven't missed us one bit.
This is why I don't get sick. Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Boozed and Confused. We did take a little bit of a break.
It's a hiatus, even.
Yeah, the executive producer was homesick, not feeling well. And then I was homesick, not feeling well, and so far Matt is the only one just chilling.
I'm just masking all the symptoms.
Yeah, just like that one lady in the zombie movie. Yeah, but we're back, and we have a not very fun topic today. It's actually really depressing. So if you're looking for something that's like more on the funny side, which we usually stick with, you can go ahead and just skip this episode, and we'll see you next week.
Don't skip it.
It's just a really fucked up topic, but I felt the need to cover it because it's horrifying. So definitely some conspiracies in there. So before we get into it, hello, I'm Carolanne.
This is Matt. Hi.
And yeah, this is our shit pod, Boozed and Confused.
Boozed and Confused.
Yeah. And
filmed in front of a studio audience.
Of the executive producer and our cats. So before we get into today's really fucked up episode, a word from our sponsor. Just kidding. I think I did that joke on the last
It's whiskey.
one. Yeah. It's we've never had a sponsor.
We're the sponsors of this show. We put money.
Yeah.
We put money into this show.
Yeah, we do. We actually pay to have this as a hobby, which aren't all hobbies mostly paid hobbies anyways. So anyways, all right, before we get into it, just a couple of notes. The first, we're on all your favorite social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. You can just find us Boozed and Confused Podcast. Any variation of that on any of those platforms should direct you in the right place. If not, then I don't know, shit out of luck. Let's
find a different pod.
Yeah. The next piece of that is, if you like the pod, just kidding. No, backtrack. If you want to send us an email, you can send us an email.
Oh, yeah, emails work.
podcast@gmail.com.
You know, my personal inbox is about to hit 11,000 unread emails. And yeah, I'm here for it. I'm this close to just deleting everything.
Yeah, I've done that once. And then I accidentally deleted a gift card that Target customer support sent me. So I will never do that again. Yeah. That was my own mistake.
Yeah. I keep going back to like my oldest emails.
Well, sometimes I'm like, even for my Google storage, I'm like, do I really need any of these files from college, which I've been out of for almost 10 years?
Yeah. I
just
still
to
see
show
my college
age.
emails to myself, where I would like email from one computer to another one.
God.
I just email myself.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm like this. Anyway, so if you like the pod and you want to support us, the best way you could do that is by leaving us a review and or subscribing, following wherever you get your podcasts. It does actually help. I swear. I see the numbers. I know it does make a difference, and we also really appreciate it. If you do any of that shit, you take a screenshot, you send it to us. We'll send you some Boozed and Confused stickers in the mail. There's going to be so many that you're going to need, I don't know, a dumpster, because that's how many we're going to send you.
You could cover your dumpster in the stickers.
Yeah, there you go. And then the last piece.
What are you drinking?
What am I drinking?
What are you drinking?
This is the first booze I've had in a hot minute. So I'm drinking Voodoo Ranger Juicy Haze IPA, and actually we were just recently at Costco. And the beer selection is dire.
Sad.
So
I mean, I would have picked up a couple of the things that we had options for,
like Miller Lite.
No, like the Sapporo or yeah, like a Stella Artois. I like those beers.
Yeah, no, not me.
I've got Stella glasses up there.
Not for me.
I'm drinking a bourbon. I'm drinking Maker's Mark. It's kind of like my go-to whiskey. Got a little splash of water in there. I don't know. they say to splash water in there.
Yeah.
2 fingers.
Yeah. Excellent. That's a heavy looking 2 fingers, but
well, what you don't see is that the
glass.
bottom of the glass is actually starting like up here.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
It is a school night.
Yeah.
It is a work night.
Yeah. So we're staying well hydrated over here. All right. So today's episode, you may have heard some of this in headlines already. There's been a few reports that have come and gone. Some podcasts have covered this. I think I listened most recently to an episode of The Daily that covered this in pretty extensive detail, which would make sense. Today's episode is heavily pushed up by New York Times. So they were, I think, really the first ones to have this extensive story. So we're taking snippets of that and talking about that today. If you want to read the full story, it's disturbing and very sad, but that is in the show notes on a primary resource for today's episode. So all right, we can just get into it now that all the warnings are over. So if you've also heard recent headlines, Arkansas just recently rolled back child labor laws, and not a single kid in the room was happy about it.
Yeah, I want to say I saw a picture on whatever Instagram of like a 12, 13-year-old working on a factory floor.
Yeah.
Not looking enthused to be there.
Yeah. So Arkansas rolled back their child labor laws to like lessen the burden on kids who are trying to work. And what's interesting is like, okay, that story is getting a lot of criticism because I think we've discovered that really kids should not have to focus on working at all. But there's a more sinister story that has been hiding kind of in the shadows. And it's not like 15-year-olds trying to get a work permit to work at their like local Dairy Queen, over the summer or some shit.
It's got its perks. You get all that ice cream. You get all that soft serve.
How much free ice cream do you think they actually get? I'd like to know.
Well, you just gotta siphon it off. You gotta.
So you're stealing from your employer.
Oh, you're that person?
No.
You're that person?
No. If I worked at Culver's, I wouldn't work at Culver's very long.
I briefly worked in the food industry. Do you know how many hot dogs I ate?
I'd like to imagine that you would just like duck to the floor and just like,
I would
in one.
In one hand, I'd be making a hot dog, and in the other, I'd be eating another.
You'd be pocketing hot dogs. You'd walk out with 10 hot dogs in each pocket.
deep fried Tootsie Rolls.
Ew, that's disgusting. That is actually vile.
That's what happens when you let a 16-year-old run a hot dog stand.
Yeah, no, that's vile. That's no thank you. So this New York Times report that I was just mentioning uncovered that there are hundreds of migrant kids in the US who are working long hours, and they're in like really dangerous jobs. It's not like they're working at Dairy Queens. And it's also not like they're working for like no-name companies like mom and pop shops. They're working at suppliers for some of the largest companies in the country, like Hyundai and General Mills. And the country itself hasn't seen such widespread numbers of children working in like meat packing and auto manufacturing and like food production since like the fucking 1930s, which is insane.
I was gonna label this episode like the new Gilded Age.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which there's some really great cartoons, not cartoon, but like political cartoons where it's the average Joe being squeezed by the rich man.
The man. It's always the man. And so you're probably listening to this going, how are kids as young as like 12 and 13 working in these dangerous factory or construction jobs? Like who is hiring 12 or 13-year-olds? And I know that kids these days look older than they actually are. Maybe it's all the
TikTok
hormones
dance.
and the
it's
milk and the TikToks. But no, it's actually just really scummy companies that are just blatantly hiring underage child labor, which is disgusting.
I would say that there's a kid at the school that I work at who looks 38 years old.
He's got a wife and 2 kids at home, but he's just trying to put money and food on the table for everybody.
That boy could shave his face at 8 a.m. and he'd have a beard by noon.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. The envy I feel is palpable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's not working on a factory floor at 3 a.m.
No, absolutely not. So these large companies like General Mills or Hyundai, a lot of times they use subcontractors, and these subcontractors then use staffing agencies to make their hires. And so it seems like everything's being outsourced, and that just makes it easier for companies to like pass the buck, right? It's like, oh, it's not our responsibility, it's their responsibility because they're the ones doing the hiring.
Yeah, we're not hiring them. They are.
Yeah, exactly. And so that means that like General Mills and Hyundai maybe don't even realize the extent of like the labor violations, like employing children throughout their production process. And like what's kind of fucked up is sometimes these staffing agencies are very purposely seeking out children. Obviously to be exploitative. It's not like these kids are making really strong wages. These are usually like really low paying jobs.
Like vulnerable kids.
Yeah. So what's kind of interesting is you would imagine that with as big of a government as we have, there would be some sort of government agency that would like, I don't know, check for violations.
Well, hold on. We don't like big government though. We like small government. Yeah,
you would think so. There is a professor named David Weil, Weil. He's worked as a senior official in the U.S. Labor Department, and we've got like a good little snippet quote from him. So he said, quote, "Our main federal agencies, like the Wage and Hour Division that I used to have not been adequately resourced for years. So, you know, I've done a calculation of how many investigators relative to the workplaces that they're responsible for. We have now compared to 1938 when this agency was started. And the agency in 1938 had 64 times the relative number of inspectors to workplaces. And we've under-resourced our agencies. We've under-resourced the solicitor's office that does the legal support to bring cases like this. And if you overlay that with this kind of complexity we have in the workplace now, where you have all these layers of people between the workers and the lead companies, it makes that task all the more difficult." So that would explain part of it.
Right. Let's just minimize the people who try and keep this under control and just carry on doing business. That's
big government, but severely underfunded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the federal government hires child welfare agencies to track minors who are deemed to be at high risk. So the caseworkers at those agencies says that the HHS regularly ignored obvious signs of labor exploitation, which the HHS was like, that's not true. No, we don't do that. And I'm sure that they do. I'm sure that they do. Do I work there? No. Do I heavily believe that they definitely partake in that? Yes. Yeah.
Just a bit.
Yeah. So in interviews with more than like 60 caseworkers, most independently estimated that about 2/3 of all unaccompanied migrant children ended up working full time. Full fucking time. They're not even working part-time jobs so they can go to school and then work. They're working full-time fucking jobs, which I don't even want to do, and I am a woman in my 30s.
Yeah, we're adults and we want to go live in the woods.
Yeah, pretty much.
But with that image of like the American dream, you know, you come here to like restart and get that equal neutral chance, that fresh start to begin and build wealth for your family, and you just get tossed in underaged to just labor in a factory floor. Yeah. And that's like, you can't even be a fucking kid. You're robbed of your childhood. You're robbed of the actual American dream, which is, going to public school and hoping you don't get involved in the next mass shooting. But you get some kind of education. You made that really dark. This has gone.
Yeah.
This has gone dark to even darker.
My views on America these days are not the best. But what's kind of crazy is like you would imagine that these kids would have some sort of support structure that would say like, maybe you shouldn't be working in dangerous jobs like this. You know, it's not like they're just cashiers at like, a retail store. These are really fucking dangerous jobs. So how are family members like even supporting them or allowing them to do this? Like, who is taking care of these kids to begin with? So in the last decade, migrant kids have been coming to the U.S. without parents in just absolutely record numbers. So I want to say that not to make this super duper political, but I think over the last couple of years, mainly within like the last couple of years of Trump's presidency, there's a lot about like, oh, keeping kids in cages. This is like kind of loosely related to that.
Has he been arrested yet, by the way?
No, not yet.
He's not in jail?
Not yet. But if you remember the whole thing of like the migrant caravan coming to the border, like there's been a lot of different border issues. And this is very much an issue, but this is kind of an issue created in a completely different way. So, just keep that in mind. This is not like, I don't know, probably some of the shit that you've been hearing over the last couple of years, because this one has been like largely under wraps, which is really fucked up. So in 2021, the number of migrant kids coming to the U.S. without their own parents, just fucking skyrocketed to like 130,000 kids. That is actually a crisis. Not this like bullshit that Fox News likes to make up just to like rile up the base. So this is like 3 times what it was 5 years before that. And a lot of these kids are coming from Central America, and they come to the U.S. like completely out of economic desperation. That's the main driver for a lot of these kids, that they come to the U.S. to be able to support their families and have a better life in America.
Yeah, like this has become like the exact opposite of things that I was reading maybe back in like 2013, 2014, where there's a story that I have my students read about a boy whose mother goes to America to work and basically live in America for years and just try and save money in the States, but also send money back home.
Yeah.
He was from Ecuador, and the whole story is him just train hopping, trying to get to America to get with his. But this is like the opposite, where it's the kids doing this now.
Yeah, and I part of it is because obviously, right, these are kids. So what are you gonna do? Send them back on the journey that they just made all the way to come to the U.S.? Like, it would, by and large, be safer for the most part for them to just stay here and be released to family, for example. But in a lot of cases, that doesn't really happen. I'm not gonna jump too far ahead, but so this New York Times report that we are getting a lot of this information from, they interviewed 100 migrant kids who are working jobs full-time or, without attending school, or full-time after classes. And these kids would go to school for 8 hours and then go rush to like an 8 or 12-hour day of work. Like, I do an 8-hour day of work. We obviously have executive producer duties, and then I just want to like melt into the couch and try to get like 7 hours of sleep at night.
It's kind of been the vibe these last couple of weeks.
And like, I just can't imagine being a little kid trying to, like, literally 12 years old, trying to work a full-time job that's super dangerous, and then have the sort of energy to also do well in school, and then also get, some kind of semblance of sleep.
I mean, that would, if you had 8 hours of school and then a 12-hour workday, I mean, you at best can get 4 hours, but that's impossible because you're not sleeping on the factory floor unless you are actually sleeping like in a car or something.
Yeah,
for a handful of hours. That's no life to live.
Yeah, and so all throughout the U.S., middle and high school teachers in like English language learner programs say that they pretty often have classrooms just completely full of students who then rush off to long shifts after their classes end, which is really sad. Like, you have entire cohorts of kids in a class together who, like, migrant kids in a class together, who then go rush off to go work immediately after class, which is fucked up. So we talked a little bit about like General Mills and Hyundai. They're definitely not the only ones involved in this. In LA, for example, there are kids who stitch like Made in America tags into J. Crew shirts. There are kids who make dinner rolls that are sold at Walmart and Target. There are kids who process milk that's used in Ben & Jerry's ice cream. There are kids who help debone chicken sold at Whole Foods. As recently as like the fall of last year, middle schoolers made Fruit of the Loom socks in Alabama, and kids in Michigan are making auto parts used by Ford and General Motors. So definitely not just General Mills and Hyundai. It's like a pretty extensive problem across various industries. It's really fucked up, and it hurts to read kids feel that they, I don't know, don't have other options. I mean, we'll get into it. In some cases, they really don't have any other options. But so when these kids show up at the border, it's the job of the government, our big old government, and the Department of Health and Human Services, that's the HHS, to monitor these kids and ensure that their sponsors will actually support them and protect them from, being fucking trafficked. And in a lot of cases, these sponsors are the ones doing the trafficking. So there's so many cases where sponsors had sponsored multiple kids and it just was not getting caught. There's a lot of kids who come here and they're immediately indebted to these sponsors. There's so many reports of trafficking. There's like a hotline that kids can call, and there's so many troubling records and reports of kids calling this hotline, and no one ever actually follows up with them. These kids are calling the fucking hotline and saying, hey, I'm being exploited. I'm working 12 hours a day. I don't get to keep anything from my paycheck. And also I'm 12. And nothing happens. Nobody follows up with them. Like, these kids expect that, once they're able to actually get to the phone and call the hotline, they're expecting, like, the police to show up and rescue them. And like, nothing.
Yeah, nothing happens. Yeah.
Nothing happens. So one case of this happening is a kid named Juanito Ferrer. He calls for help after he's brought to Manassas, Virginia, at 15 by an acquaintance who forced him to paint houses during the day and then guard an apartment complex at night. His sponsor took his paychecks, watched him on security cameras, and he had to sleep on the basement floor.
That's just servitude. That's just indentured servitude.
Yeah. Isn't that fucked up? So Juanito said that he called the hotline in 2019 and the person on the other end took a report. And Juanito says, I thought they'd send police or someone to check, but they never did. I thought they would come and inspect the house at least. And he eventually escaped on his own. So like he could still be there in that situation had it not been for his own efforts to, save himself. So concerns started piling up in like the summer of 2021 at the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is like a division of the HHS. And the Office of Refugee Resettlement is responsible for unaccompanied migrant children. So in July of 2021, there's a memo. 11 managers said that they were worried that labor trafficking was increasing and complained to their bosses that the office had become, quote, one that rewards individuals for making quick releases and not one that rewards individuals for preventing unsafe releases.
So you just want bulk, just get all the kids out there.
Yeah.
Get these people out here.
Yeah, it literally became a situation where, and this guy is a fucking piece of shit. It came a situation where it was almost compared to like, we need to have the efficiency of like a Henry Ford OG plant essentially, and just like churning kids out. I
mean, Ford was a pretty bad dude.
Well, I mean, yeah, all things aside, that's the kind of efficiency that they wanted. And like,
well, yeah, but like, to hell with the people, to hell with the human side of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, always.
We're going to churn out those parts, though.
Yeah, it's always about profit. So staff members said in interviews that Becerra, who is like one of the heads that they complained about, continued to push for just faster results and would ask them why they wouldn't discharge children with machine-like efficiency. So that's that like Henry Ford sort of, efficiency that he was looking for. And so, like, you can imagine the number of kids coming to the U.S. explodes. It's just completely stressing the existing system. Caseworkers have said that they're being rushed through the vetting process for sponsors for these kids because there's just higher demands on staffers to move the kids out of shelters and into the care of adults. And so when we say that like monitoring kids is the responsibility of HHS, like at a minimum, they're calling all minors a month after they begin living with their sponsors. Okay. Just one phone call. Over the last 2 years, HHS couldn't reach more than 85,000 kids. So they lost like immediate contact with a third of those kids.
One phone call might even get answered.
Yeah.
Now, call, that's it.
I mean, and like, how heartbreaking is that? Like, I just, like, how fucking scary too. You know what I mean? Like, how many of these kids are going into unsafe situations where like, yeah, obviously you're not going to be able to fucking reach them over a phone call. Like, I just, this whole thing makes me so mad.
But come on, think about the economy.
Yeah, the economy. The economy.
We've had a really hard time making record profits.
Inflation is hurting our profits.
Can you guys please buy our stuff? We're really sorry.
We're really sorry. And also, we have to employ children illegally because no one wants these jobs because they're so bad paying.
Because the government gave you money.
Yeah.
And now no one wants to work. So now
they're going to increase our taxes.
So now we need to make little kids with their little small hands work on stuff.
And I need another boat. Need a
new jet.
God, fuck these companies. All right, so let's come back to the economic desperation piece. A lot of these kids are sending cash back to their families, and they're under like really intense pressure to earn money. Right? That's why a lot of these families would risk their kids making the journey up to the United States in the first place, because those kids, one, have a much higher chance of making it to the border, making it over the border, getting into a place, and then getting placed into an actual job. I think I had a second point there that's just gone from my mind unless I wrapped it into the last one. But here's the problem. A lot of these fucking kids are in debt to their sponsors, and sometimes they don't even know it until they get here. So that debt could look like paying back for smuggling fees or rent or living expenses. And again, reminder, these are kids not even 18. Like, there should not be 13, 15, 16-year-old kids paying fucking rent to somebody who's probably trafficking them to begin with.
Yeah, the predators.
So, like, yeah, I'm just of the very strong opinion kids who are under 18 shouldn't be paying adults for, like, any fucking living expenses, whether that's rent or, like, I just, yeah. So, part of the problem is these sponsors are doing this, and they're making a fucking business out of it. They've literally this is, like, their income stream, which is fucking disgusting. It's like...
This is some dystopian shit right here.
It really is. So in Pennsylvania, there's a caseworker who told the New York Times he went to go check on a kid that was released to a man who had applied to sponsor 20 other minors. What the fuck?
I don't know how you get that many kids.
So this kid vanished. This kid fucking vanished that he tried to check on. In Texas, there's another caseworker who said she encountered a man who had been targeting poor families in Guatemala, obviously, because they're fucking desperate for any kind of help that they can get. So he promises them that they'll get rich if they send their kid across the border. And he fucking sponsored 13 kids. Like, we are just very willingly allowing these fucking traffickers to live amongst us as normal in society.
It's disgusting.
Like, what the fuck? So sponsors are legally required to send kids to school. And obviously these kids try to juggle classes and really heavy workloads. And then some kids arrive to find that their sponsors actually just completely fucking lied to them. They won't be enrolled in school at all. And I mean, really, if you're a kid who's not related at all to your sponsor, or your sponsor is a distant relative that's just a giant piece of shit, what options do you have? It's literally just modern slavery and hostage.
It's indentured servitude.
Yeah,
it's where
there's that word
where you just get stuck, indebted and stuck, and they just take advantage of it until you run dry. That's it. That's all it is.
Until your fucking arms get ripped off in a conveyor belt, and then you're not useful anymore because you can't work. Which has happened. There are kids. We'll get into it later. So one story that is really fucking sad. There's a kid named Neri Kutzal who's 13 when he meets a sponsor over Facebook Messenger. So he comes to Florida. He discovers that he owes more than $4,000 and has to find his own place to live. He's 13. His sponsor sent him threatening text messages, kept a list of running debts, right? So like, you owe me $140 for filling out HHS paperwork. You owe me $240 for clothes from Walmart. And also, if you're spending $240 of fucking clothes from Walmart, that's enough to like clothe an entire family.
That's
okay.
That's a lot of clothes from Walmart.
Yeah. What the fuck? So anyways, $45 for a taco dinner. Like, yeah, okay. So Neri starts working until like 3 a.m. most nights at a Mexican restaurant near, Palm Beach to make these payments. And then he said, quote, he said I would be able to go to school and he'd take care of me, but obviously it was all lies. So Neri eventually contacts law enforcement. His sponsor is found guilty of smuggling a kid into the United States for financial gain. And like, that's rare to have somebody arrested and actually convicted in this kind of situation.
I mean, like every piece of trash needs to be thrown into jail for this.
Yeah, like
every single one.
Here's like, I understand the agencies are understaffed, but like, holy shit, it can't be fucking hard to find like some little pieces connecting all these pieces of shit together. Like, I just, like, I think a lot about Law and Order SVU and how a lot of like the sick perverts who are people downloading like child porn or people who are, like, I don't know, whatever. There's always some kind of fucking network tying these people together, and like that's what like all the stings are, sting operations.
Yeah, you gotta get in.
You take one down, you can like take down 50 more. You're telling me there's no network that's connecting these fucking people together and everyone is just an entrepreneur starting their own business of like fucking child smuggling? That's what I don't understand. Someone put me on the fucking case. I'm about to write to HHS and just volunteer my
You're
services.
gonna call Dick Wolf up.
I'm gonna call Dick Wolf and we're gonna get to the bottom of this shit.
You.
Oh God. So anyways, so that outcome of Neri's sponsor being convicted is rare because in the last decade, federal prosecutors have brought only like 30 fucking cases involving forced labor of unaccompanied minors, according to this review of like court databases. So that's great. Yeah, that's great. Great track record. We have a couple other stories. So if you listen to any of the podcasts that talk about this, or if you read the New York Times story in more detail, you'll hear a lot about a girl named Carolanne. She's like the focus of a lot of these stories. So she comes to the United States on her own last year to like live with a relative that she'd never actually met. So this is a case of like, she does technically have a relative that lives here, very distant, does not know her. And so, she like is forced to work because there's no other fucking option. So she starts working in this like factory setting where she's like stuffing sealed plastic bags of cereal into a passing yellow carton. There's like fast moving pulleys and gears, and like people have had their fucking fingers torn off. And like in one situation in this factory, a woman's scalp was ripped off. So like, yeah, perfect. Let's bring a fucking child into that workplace. And so that factory in particular that Carolanne was working at was full of underage workers like Carolanne. They all came to the southern border by themselves, and now they all work super late hours in like really hazardous machinery, obviously in violation of like child labor laws. And so Carolanne is from Guatemala. She had like no idea really what she was heading towards. She just said like she couldn't stay in her village because there wasn't really electricity or water. And then the pandemic really worsened their food insecurity and food crisis there. And so what she understood is the only people in Guatemala who were getting by were people who had relatives living in the United States that would send money back.
Yeah, that connection.
Yeah, exactly. So she lived alone with her grandmother in Guatemala, and her grandmother started getting sick. And so her neighbors started talking about just going north. And so Carolanne was like, Carolina was like, all right, yeah, I'll go. You know, she's like 14. So she said, like, I just kept walking. Like, that's a really fucking long journey too. That is such a long journey. So she reaches the U.S. border. She's absolutely exhausted. She weighs 84 pounds. She gets sent to an HHS shelter in Arizona, and there's a caseworker who contacts her aunt, Marcelina Ramirez. And Ramirez is like, no. Like, I already sponsored 2 other relatives. I have 3 kids of my own. We live on like $600 a week. I don't know Carolina. I can't support another kid.
Yeah, that's just okay.
So then Carolina arrives in Grand Rapids in 2022. You know, she's told that she'll go to school every morning. It's suggested like she'll pick up evening shifts at Hearthside, which is one of those factories that is just very lovingly exploiting child labor. So, you know, Carolina, it was known and expected that she would send money back to her grandmother. And child labor in Guatemala is like the norm in rural Guatemala, at least. Okay. There's 3 people who, until like last year, worked at Forge Industrial Staffing, which is like one of the biggest employment agencies in Grand Rapids. They said that Hearthside supervisors were sometimes even made aware that they were getting young looking workers whose identities had been flagged as false. And they're probably like, don't care.
Yeah, we got him. Yeah.
So Kevin Tomas said he sought work through Forge after he arrived in Grand Rapids at age 13 with his 7-year-old brother. So at first, he sent to a local manufacturer that made auto parts for Ford and General Motors, and his shift would end at like 6:30 in the morning. So obviously, he had a hard time staying awake in school.
Right, because you go 6:30, you've got maybe an hour and a half before your school day starts.
Yeah, not even. So he like struggled to lift heavy boxes, and so Kevin said like, it's not like we want to work these jobs. We have to just help our families. That's the expectation. So by the time he's 15, Kevin finds a job at Hearthside, and he's stacking 50-pound cases of cereal on the same shift as Carolina. So let's just say, like, one of the reasons we even have child labor laws in the United States, I just think about like how easy it is for kids to get hurt, how frail and fragile their little bodies can be. And also, like, they don't have the same, like, I don't know, like mental wiring that we do.
The technical abilities, the little things you pick up, like the skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, the wiring of the brain, it's all different.
Yeah, like, so, like, all of that being said, like, it obviously puts these kids at significantly higher risk of getting hurt than, like, their adult counterparts in the same fucking job. Like, even when I was like 25, I didn't want to lift 50-pound boxes at work all day. You know, like, that shit really wears you down fast. And so there are federal laws that bar kids from like a very long list of dangerous jobs, including like roofing and meat processing and commercial banking. Baking, not banking.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say banking. That seems.
They're not your tellers at your local bank. I'm saying baking. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, except on farms, children younger than 16 are not supposed to work for more than 3 hours or after 7 p.m. on work days. I'm sure absolutely none of the supervisors that are purposely seeking out child labor give a fuck about that. Not a single one. So this part is going to be a little bit gruesome. So it's talking about some of the injuries and deaths that migrant children have faced. I'm getting like unsure faces from Matt. So if you really don't want to hear any of this, thanks so much for joining us this week. See you next week. All right, now that you've had your content warning for disturbing content, I'll give you like 2 more seconds. All right, we're going to get into it. So getting back to why minors and, kids in general just shouldn't be working any of these fucking dangerous jobs. Unaccompanied minors have had their legs torn off in factories. They've had their spines shattered on construction sites, and a lot of these injuries go uncounted. So it was revealed that the Labor Department tracks the deaths of foreign-born child workers, but they don't actually make it public anymore. So the last time that was really published was like 2017, which is not the greatest. But the Times found that in the last time that this was reported, there were a dozen cases of young migrant workers killed since 2017. The last piece is that the deaths include a 14-year-old food delivery worker who was hit by a car. He was on his bike in a Brooklyn intersection. There's a 16-year-old who's crushed under a 35-ton tractor scraper outside of Atlanta. There's a 15-year-old who fell 50 feet from a roof in Alabama when he was laying down shingles. And I mean, these are just a couple of examples. And that's not even to mention the kids who are like fucking maimed, still living, but maimed through all of the shifts that they've worked. So, yeah, the Labor Department is supposed to fucking do their job, and they find and punish child labor violations, but obviously everybody's like, we're all understaffed. No one wants to work anymore.
Right. But
in reality, I'm sure they just don't get enough funding, but
then on the flip side of things, you're getting these politicians who are trying to like weaken the child labor protections so that
I don't understand that.
So that this can happen more frequently.
Anything in the name of capitalism, baby. Yeah. So the Labor Department like does respond to tips on migrant children, but they focus on outside contractors and like the staffing agencies that, you know, like the Forge, that employ them, and not the corporations where they perform the work. So it's like staffing agencies are a fucking dime a dozen. When you really start making it count is when you start going after the corporations themselves. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but they're all buddied up.
Yeah, they're all fucking buddied
They're
up.
in
Everyone's
bed with the
buddied
politicians.
up.
They're in bed together.
Oh, God. So, yeah, that's today's episode. This is, again, we're like, I don't know, this is a 40-minute episode. And this is literally just a snippet of the New York Times article. If this is enough for you to want to read it, feel free. It's in the show notes. There's also an NPR link. You could also find, I think, like a daily episode that talks about this. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's disappointing. So, well, that's it for today. I got nothing else.
This is a really fun one.
Yeah, we'll try to make it more fun next week. But all right, well, all right, bye.
God bless America.
Yeah, great. All right, goodbye.
Goodbye.